woman sat bound to a chair, zip ties cutting into her wrists. Across the desk, a man in an expensive suit leaned forward with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Your daughter is safe at her after-school program," he said pleasantly. "For now. Whether she stays safe depends entirely on you." The woman's voice came out as a snarl. "Where is Jade?" Blake Donovan tilted his head, studying her like a scientist examining a specimen. "Your daughter is 6 years old, isn't she? So vulnerable. Children are fragile, Miss Torres. A car accident, a house fire, an abduction. These things happen every day. If you touch her, I won't need to touch her if you do exactly what I say. But let me take you back, because this moment, this threat against an innocent child, it all started 3 weeks earlier, on a rainy highway when a single mother made a choice that would change 3 lives forever. Have you ever faced a split-second decision where your heart said yes, but your head screamed no? Have you ever been so exhausted you could barely think straight, yet something inside you refused to keep driving? This is what happened when Bryn Torres, a forensic nurse working double shifts just to survive, saw a luxury car explode on a highway. She had every reason to keep driving. A sleeping child in her back seat. No money, no backup, no business getting involved in whatever horror was unfolding on that embankment. But she didn't keep driving. What she found in that burning wreck wasn't just a man fighting for his life. It was a conspiracy that would put her daughter in danger, test every ounce of her courage, and prove that sometimes one act of kindness doesn't just change your life. It rewrites your entire future. If you've ever wondered whether one person can really make a difference, stay with me. And before we dive in, hit that like button, because this story deserves to be heard. Trust me, what happens next will restore your faith in the power of courage. Now let me tell you how it really began. The rain hammered against Bryn Torres's windshield like angry fists, turning the highway into a river of reflected headlights and danger. Her hands ached from gripping the steering wheel for the past 2 hours, and her eyes, burned from the 14-hour shift she'd just finished at County Memorial Hospital. In the back seat, 6-year-old Jade was finally asleep after their long trip from her grandmother's house, her small chest rising and falling peacefully despite the storm raging outside. Bryn glanced in the rearview mirror at her daughter's face, relaxed in sleep, dark curls plastered against her cheek. She looked so much like her father in moments like this. The thought brought the familiar ache of abandonment, quickly followed by the fiercer emotion of gratitude. Better to raise Jade alone than with a man who saw his family as a burden. Being a forensic nurse wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and used the medical degree she'd fought so hard to earn as a single mother. She was good at finding the truth hidden in injuries, at reading the stories bodies told when voices stayed silent. She'd testified in court about abuse disguised as accidents, about violence masked as misfortune. She knew how to see what others missed. The silver Porsche appeared out of nowhere. One moment the highway ahead was clear, just rain and darkness and the rhythmic swipe of windshield wipers. The next moment, the expensive sports car was hydroplaning across 3 lanes of traffic, the driver clearly fighting for control. Bryn watched in horror as the Porsche careened off the highway embankment, and time seemed to slow down. The car tumbled end over end, metal shrieking against rock in a sound that would haunt her dreams for weeks. Once, twice, 3 times it rolled before coming to rest upside down in the ravine below. For a heartbeat, everything was silent except for the rain. Then sparks flew from the undercarriage, and within seconds orange flames began licking at the twisted metal. Oh God. Bryn's foot hit the brake automatically, her car sliding slightly on the wet pavement before coming to rest on the shoulder. Her hazard lights flashed, painting the interior in rhythmic red pulses. She looked back at Jade, still sleeping, oblivious to the disaster unfolding outside. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to keep driving, to protect her daughter, to not get involved in whatever tragedy was happening down that embankment. She had no phone signal out here, no way to call for help, no business being a hero. Most people would have called 911 and kept driving, especially with a child in the car. Bryn wasn't most people. Her hands shook as she unbuckled Jade, who stirred but didn't wake. Bryn laid her daughter carefully across the back seat, covering her with the soft blanket that went everywhere with them, the one with elephants on it that Jade had loved since she was 2. She locked the doors, checked them twice, and grabbed the emergency medical kit she always kept in her trunk, the one her ex-husband had rolled his eyes at and called paranoid. Guess I'm not so paranoid now, she thought grimly. I'll be right back, baby, she whispered against the window, even though Jade couldn't hear her. "Mommy will be right back." The rain soaked through her scrubs within seconds as she scrambled down the embankment. Loose gravel slid beneath her sneakers, and she had to grab at exposed roots to keep from tumbling down. Her medical kit banged against her hip. Below, the flames were spreading, creeping from the engine toward the passenger compartment with terrifying speed. The heat hit her face like a physical wall when she reached the overturned vehicle. Through the shattered driver's side window, she could see a man hanging upside down. From his seatbelt, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead onto the car's ceiling. His eyes were closed, face pale in the firelight. "Hey." She pounded on what was left of the window frame, ignoring the glass cutting into her palm. "Can you hear me?" Nothing, no response. The flames crackled louder, and she could smell gasoline mixing with burning rubber. She had maybe 2 minutes before the fuel tank went. Maybe less. Bryn didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees and peered through the window, assessing with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent years in emergency situations. The driver's door was completely crushed, crumpled like aluminum foil from the impact, but the passenger side looked accessible. She crawled around the vehicle, glass crunching under her knees, smoke burning her lungs. The passenger door was damaged but not destroyed. She grabbed the handle and pulled, using her full body weight. It groaned, resisted, then suddenly gave way and swung open. Thank God. Thank God. Bryn crawled through the opening, the heat intensifying with every inch. Up close, she could see the man was young, mid-30s maybe, wearing what had probably been an expensive Navy suit before the crash reduced it to torn and bloodied fabric. His breathing was labored but steady. Blood seeped from the gash on his forehead, and there was already swelling along his left arm. "Stay with me," she commanded, her nurse training overriding her fear. She pulled out her trauma scissors from the medical kit. "What's your name?" His eyes flickered open. They were striking blue, even dilated with trauma and confusion. He tried to focus on her face, his lips moving soundlessly. "Your name," she repeated, beginning to cut through the seatbelt. "Stay awake and tell me your name." "Rhodes," he managed, his voice rough and weak. Rhodes Callahan. The name was vaguely familiar, tickling at the edges of her memory. But she didn't have time to place it. The seatbelt was tough, designed to withstand exactly this kind of impact, and her scissors were sharp but small. "Okay, Rhodes, I'm Bryn, and I'm going to get you out of here. But I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that for me?" He nodded weakly, then groaned at the movement. "Hurts. I know it hurts. Just a few more seconds." The seatbelt finally gave way with a snap, and Rhodes collapsed onto what was now the ceiling of his overturned car. He cried out in pain, and Bryn saw his left arm was definitely broken. Possible concussion, definite trauma, but none of it would matter if they didn't get out before the tank exploded. "This is going to hurt," she warned, hooking her arms under his shoulders. "I'm sorry, but we have to move now." She dragged him toward the passenger door, and he was heavier than he looked. Pure dead weight that made her muscles scream in protest. But she'd pulled her daughter from a house fire when Jade was just a baby, had learned exactly what her body could do when someone she cared about was in danger. Except she didn't care about this stranger. She just couldn't let him die. 20 feet from the car. Her arms were shaking, her lungs burning from smoke inhalation. 30 feet. Rhodes was trying to help, using his good arm to push against the ground, but he was too disoriented to be much assistance. 50 feet. Almost to the drainage ditch where they'd have some protection from the blast. The gas tank exploded. The force of it knocked them both forward, and Bryn threw herself over Rhodes's body, shielding him from the raining debris. Heat seared her back, singeing through her scrubs and the jacket beneath. She felt something hot land on her shoulder and frantically brushed it away. Her ears rang from the explosion, but they were alive. For a moment they lay there in the mud and rain, her ear pressed against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his ruined shirt. Then he stirred, a low groan escaping his lips. "You're okay," she said, pulling back to assess him properly. She ran her hands over his skull, checking for depression fractures, and examined his pupils with the small penlight from her kit. Blood still seeped from the head wound, but his pupils were equal and reactive. That's good. You were in an accident, but you're going to be fine." His blue eyes focused on her face, confused and disoriented but trying to understand. When he spoke, His voice was barely audible over the rain and the crackling fire behind them. That wasn't an accident. Bryn leaned closer, certain she'd misheard over the storm. What? Someone cut my brake lines, Rhodes whispered, his hand suddenly gripping her wrist, with surprising strength for someone who'd just been pulled from a burning car. Someone tried to kill me. The words hung in the air between them, and Bryn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain soaking through her clothes. But before she could respond, before she could ask what he meant or tell him he was, probably confused from the head trauma, she heard a sound that stopped her heart. Mommy. Bryn's head snapped up. Jade was standing at the edge of the embankment in her pajamas, rain plastering. Her dark curls to her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jade, stay there, Bryn shouted, already moving. Don't come down here. But the 6-year-old was already scrambling down the slope, sobbing hysterically. I woke up and you were gone, and there was fire, and I thought. The little girl's foot slipped on the wet rocks. She tumbled forward, arms windmilling, heading straight for the burning wreckage. Bryn lunged, her heart in her throat, and caught Jade just before she hit the twisted metal. She gathered her daughter into her arms, checking frantically for injuries, even as Jade wrapped her arms around Bryn's neck and sobbed. I'm okay, baby. I'm right here. You're safe. I was scared, Jade cried against her mother's neck. I thought the fire got you like it got Daddy. Bryn's heart clenched. Jade's father hadn't died in a fire. Marcus Torres had simply walked out when their daughter was 2, leaving them with nothing but debt and broken promises and a forwarding address he never answered. But Jade's only real memory of him was from the house fire that had destroyed their first apartment when she was 3. The night Bryn had carried her baby through flames to safety, emerging onto the street with nothing but the clothes on their backs and each other. Jade had been having nightmares about fire ever since. I'm here, sweetheart, Bryn said, holding her daughter tight. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. The sound of sirens cut through the storm. Red and blue lights painted the rain as emergency vehicles arrived on the highway above. Paramedics were already scrambling down the embankment, and Bryn found herself being ushered. To the side, Jade clutched tight in her arms while they loaded Rhodes onto a stretcher. Ma'am, are you injured? A young EMT with kind eyes and rain dripping from his cap was examining her hands, the burns on her back. I'm fine. I'm a nurse. I know what to look for. You saved his life, the EMT said, nodding toward Rhodes as they carried him past. That was incredibly brave. Most people would have kept driving. I did what anyone would do. No, ma'am, most people wouldn't have. As they carried Rhodes past her, his eyes found hers through the rain and chaos. His lips moved, forming 2 words. Thank you. Something passed between them in that moment. A connection forged in fire and desperation, rescuer and rescued, 2. Strangers bound together by 60 seconds of courage and choice. Bryn told herself it was just adrenaline, just the natural bond that forms in crisis situations. She told herself she'd never see him again, that this was just another emergency she'd handled, another life she'd saved in her career of saving lives. She was wrong on both counts. 24 hours later, Bryn stood in the doorway of Rhodes Callahan's private hospital room at County Memorial, Jade's small hand gripped tightly in hers. She'd told herself she was just checking on a patient, making sure the man she'd pulled from the wreckage was recovering. It was the professional thing to do, the responsible thing, but the truth was more complicated. His words echoed in her mind, playing on repeat through her shift, through the sleepless night that followed. Someone cut my brake lines. Someone tried to kill me. As a forensic nurse, Bryn had seen too many accidents that weren't accidents at all. She'd testified in court about the patterns of injuries that told stories of abuse, of violence, of murder disguised as misfortune. And something about Rhodes Callahan's crash had triggered every instinct she'd honed over years of reading between the lines. The newspapers had identified him. Rhodes Callahan, CEO of Callahan Industries, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies on the East Coast. 34 years old, Harvard-educated, worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 million. The kind of man who traveled in circles so far removed from hers they might as well be different planets. And yet here she was, standing in his doorway because she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd saved him from something worse than a car accident. You came back, Rhodes said when he saw her. He was sitting up in bed, a bandage across his forehead where they'd stitched the gash. His left arm was in a sling, and there were monitors beeping softly beside him. But he looked infinitely better than he had 12 hours ago, those blue eyes alert and focused, Then his gaze dropped to Jade, who was hiding halfway behind her mother's leg. "And you brought a friend." "This is Jade," Bryn said, feeling oddly nervous. "My daughter. She wanted to make sure you were okay." That wasn't entirely true. Jade had been having nightmares about the fire, waking up screaming that the man was still trapped in the car, that the flames were going to get him. Bryn had finally agreed to this visit as much for her daughter's peace of mind as for any other reason. Sometimes seeing that someone was safe was the only way to convince a traumatized child that the monster wasn't real. "Hi, Jade," Rhodes said gently, his entire demeanor softening as he looked at the little girl. "Thank you for checking on me. That's very kind of you." Jade stepped out from behind Bryn's leg, her dark eyes solemn in that way children get when they're processing something too big for their understanding. "Mommy says you're a hero because you didn't give up even when you were scared." Rhodes blinked, clearly surprised by this assessment. "I think your mommy is the hero here, Jade. She's the one who saved me." "Nuh-uh." Jade shook her head with the absolute certainty only a 6-year-old could muster. "Mommy says everybody's scared sometimes, but brave people keep trying anyway. She says you stayed awake even when it hurt so she could save you. That's brave." Bryn felt her cheeks flush. "Jade, honey, why don't you sit in that chair over there and color in your book while I talk to Mr. Callahan for a minute?" "Can I call him Rhodes?" Jade asked. "Mr. Callahan is too long." Rhodes laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. "You can absolutely call me Rhodes." Once Jade was settled with her crayons and coloring book, humming softly to herself, as she always did when she was focused, Bryn moved closer to the bed. She lowered her voice, even though Jade was absorbed in her task. "Do you remember what you told me about it not being an accident?" Rhodes's expression shifted from gentle amusement to something harder, more guarded. "Every word. Do you believe me? I'm a forensic nurse. I've seen enough suspicious injuries to know that not everything is what it seems." She pulled up a chair, sitting down so they were at eye level. "Tell me what happened." "For the next 20 minutes, Rhodes explained, his voice low and controlled but edged with anger he was clearly trying to contain. He was the CEO of Callahan Industries, a pharmaceutical company his grandfather had founded 50 years ago. They developed drugs for everything from heart disease to Alzheimer's, medications that helped millions of people around the world. 6 months earlier, he'd discovered irregularities in their research division. Clinical trials with data that didn't quite add up, adverse reactions that seemed underreported, patients who'd been listed as lost to follow up, but whose families claimed they died during the trials. When I confronted Blake Donovan, my head of research, he swore it was all a misunderstanding, Rhodes said. "Blake has been with the company for 15 years. He was my father's closest friend, someone I trusted completely. I wanted to believe him." "But you didn't," Bryn said. "No. I couldn't ignore what I was seeing, so I hired an external auditor to review everything. Every trial, every report, every piece of data from the research division for the past 5 years. And what did they find?" Rhodes's jaw tightened. 2 days before the crash, I got the preliminary results. Blake wasn't just falsifying data. He was systematically manipulating clinical trials to hide serious side effects, even deaths, and he was selling our proprietary research to competitors, pocketing millions while putting patients at risk. Bryn felt a chill run down her spine despite the warmth of the hospital room. "How many patients?" "We don't know yet. At least 40 based on the initial review. Maybe more. 40 people dead because someone wanted to make money." The number was staggering, incomprehensible. "And you think Blake tried to kill you to stop you from exposing him?" "The brake lines on my car were professionally cut. Not hacked or torn, cut. The mechanic who examined what was left of the wreckage after the fire said it was designed to look like wear and tear, to fail at high speed." Rhodes met her eyes. "If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't stopped..." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Bryn had seen the twisted metal, felt the heat of the flames. Without intervention, Rhodes would have burned to death in that car, and Blake Donovan would have gotten away with murder. Multiple murders. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know." Rhodes ran his good hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I can't trust anyone at the company. Blake has allies everywhere. On the board, in research, maybe even in law enforcement. And I can't prove the tampering since the car was destroyed in the explosion." Bryn made a decision that would change both their lives. "I might be able to help you." Rhodes stared at her. "How?" "You're a nurse." "I'm a forensic nurse," she corrected. I specialize in identifying injuries and deaths that don't match the official story. I've worked with police, prosecutors, federal investigators on dozens of cases. If Blake is falsifying clinical trial data, people are getting hurt. Patients are dying. She leaned forward. That's exactly my area of expertise. You barely know me, Rhodes said slowly. Why would you want to get involved in this? It could be dangerous. Bryn glanced at Jade, who was still coloring peacefully, completely unaware of the conversation happening 3 feet away. Because I know what it's like when powerful people hurt vulnerable ones and get away with it. Because I've seen too many victims who never get justice, because the system protects the wealthy and connected, and because if someone is willing to commit murder to hide pharmaceutical fraud, then patients are in danger right now, today, while we sit here talking. It could put you at risk. Your daughter at risk. I can take care of myself. And Jade. Bryn's voice was firm. I'm not some helpless civilian, Rhodes. I've dealt with violent patients, abusive family members, stalkers, and an ex-husband who tried to take Jade from me just to hurt me. I know how to protect what matters. Something shifted in Rhodes's expression. Respect, mixed with something deeper. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of trust. Okay, he said finally. But we do this carefully. If Blake suspects I'm investigating him, if he thinks I survived the crash and I'm still digging, then we make sure he doesn't suspect, Bryn interrupted. We make you look like you're too injured and traumatized to be a threat. You take medical leave, you stay quiet, you don't talk to anyone at the company. And while you're recovering, I'll start looking into the clinical trial data. I have contacts at the FDA, people who owe me favors from past cases. Let me make some calls. Mommy. Jade's voice broke through their intense conversation. Can Rhodes see my picture? Of course, baby. Bryn stood, grateful for the interruption, for the reminder that she had responsibilities beyond corporate conspiracies and attempted murder. What did you draw? Jade held up her coloring book, and Bryn's heart squeezed. It was a picture of 3 people, a woman, a man, and a little girl. They were holding hands, and above them, Jade had colored a rainbow. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Who are they? That's you and me and Rhodes, Jade said matter-of-factly. Because he's our friend now. Friends hold hands. Rhodes's eyes were suspiciously bright as he looked at the picture. That's the nicest thing anyone's drawn for me in a very long time, Jade. Thank you. You're welcome. Can we come visit you again? Jade, Bryn started, but Rhodes spoke over her. I would really like that. If it's okay with your mom. And that's how it started. Not with some grand romantic gesture or dramatic declaration, but with a little girl's drawing, a mother's determination to protect the vulnerable, and a man who'd looked death in the face and decided to fight back. Over the next week, Bryn threw herself into the investigation with the same intensity she brought to every case that mattered. She worked her regular shifts at the hospital, picked up Jade from school, maintained their normal routine, but every spare moment was spent digging into Callahan Industries' clinical trials. She started with public records. Clinical trials were supposed to be registered with the government, their results published for transparency. But as Bryn quickly discovered, there were ways around that. Trials that were started but never completed. Data that was submitted but heavily redacted. Patients who consented to participate but whose outcomes were never fully reported. Rhodes, now on medical leave from Callahan Industries, provided her with access to the company's internal files. Or at least, the files he could access without raising red flags. He worked from his penthouse apartment, a sleek modern space with floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking the city, while Bryn worked from her tiny apartment. Across town, Jade doing homework at the kitchen table while her mother scrolled through spreadsheets on a laptop held together with duct tape. Look at this, Bryn said during one of their phone calls. Trial 47C. According to the public records, it was a Phase 2 trial for an Alzheimer's drug. 40 participants, minimal side effects, promising results. That's Blake's flagship project, Rhodes said. He's been pushing for FDA approval for 2 years. According to the actual internal data you sent me, 15% of participants experienced fatal brain hemorrhages. Bryn's voice was tight with controlled anger. That's 6 people, Rhodes. 6 people who died, and the official report only mentions mild neurological side effects in 2% of subjects. She could hear Rhodes breathing on the other end of the line, could picture him processing this information with the same horror she'd felt when she'd first calculated the numbers. How many other trials? He asked finally. At least 9 that I can confirm so far. all showing the same pattern. Serious adverse events, downgraded or omitted entirely. Deaths listed as lost to follow up. Control groups manipulated to make the experimental drugs appear more effective than they actually were. We need to go to the police. With what evidence? Bryn rubbed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. These are internal company documents that you technically shouldn't have given me. Any lawyer worth their fee will get them thrown out as stolen property. We need something that can't be dismissed, something that proves Blake personally falsified the data. What do you suggest? Patient records. FDA regulations require that trial participants receive copies of their informed consent documents and have the right to access their own medical records. Blake can destroy the company's files, but he can't destroy what belongs to the patients. You want to contact the trial participants, the ones who are still alive, yes, or the families of the ones who died. If even a few of them kept their paperwork, we can compare their records to Blake's official reports. Any discrepancies prove fraud. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Rhodes spoke again, his voice was filled with something that sounded like awe. That's brilliant. It's basic forensic investigation, Bryn said, but she felt a small flush of pride despite herself. I know people. Support groups for families who've lost someone in clinical trials. Patient advocacy organizations. Let me reach out to them. Bryn, Rhodes's voice grew serious. If you do this, there's no going back. Blake will know someone is investigating him. He'll figure out it's connected to me. And if he's willing to cut brake lines, I'm not afraid of him, Bryn interrupted. You should be. He tried to kill me, and I'm a CEO with resources and security. You're a single mother working at a hospital. I'm not as vulnerable as you think, Bryn said quietly. I've been taking care of myself and my daughter for 6 years. I've dealt with violent patients, abusive family members, and an ex-husband who showed up drunk at Jade's school, trying to take her just to hurt me. I know how to protect what matters. Let me help protect you then. Rhodes's voice was urgent now. Security for your apartment, an escort to and from work. I have resources, Bryn. Let me use them. I can't afford. I'm not asking you to pay for it. You're saving my company, my reputation, maybe my life. The least I can do is make sure you and Jade stay safe. Before Bryn could respond, Jade appeared in the doorway of her bedroom, rubbing her eyes. Mommy, who are you talking to? Just Rhodes, baby. Go back to bed. Is he okay? Is he still hurt? He's getting better every day. Can we go visit him? Jade asked with the persistence only a 6-year-old could manage. I want to show him my new drawing. Bryn looked at her daughter, at the hope and trust in those dark eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. Jade had been abandoned by her father, had learned too young that the people who were supposed to stay sometimes left. But here she was, ready to trust again, ready to believe that this man they barely knew might actually stick around. How about this, Bryn said, making a decision that felt both terrifying and right. How about we visit Rhodes tomorrow? It's Saturday, so you don't have school. We could bring lunch. Really? Jade's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? But now, you need to sleep. After Jade was tucked back in, Bryn returned to the phone. Sorry about that. Don't apologize, Rhodes said, and there was warmth in his voice that made her stomach flutter in a way she absolutely did not have time for. She's wonderful, Bryn. You're doing an amazing job with her. I'm doing my best. It's not always enough. It's more than enough. She's kind, she's resilient, she's smart. That doesn't happen by accident. Bryn felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. She was so tired. Tired of working double shifts, tired of worrying about money, tired of being both mother and father to a little girl who deserved so much more than a studio apartment and a mom who was too exhausted to play most evenings. Thank you, she managed. That means more than you know. Listen, Rhodes said. Tomorrow when you come over, bring your laptop. We can work on the investigation while Jade draws or watches a movie. I have the good crayons. Bryn laughed despite everything. The good crayons. Professional grade. 64 colors. I may have gone shopping after Jade mentioned she liked to draw. Rhodes Callahan, are you trying to bribe my daughter with art supplies? Absolutely. Is it working? Completely. We'll be there at noon. And that's how their routine began. Saturdays at Rhodes's penthouse became the highlight of Jade's week, and, though Bryn was reluctant to admit it, the highlight of hers too. Rhodes would order pizza from the place down the street, the one that made the crust exactly how Jade liked it, crispy but not too crispy. Jade would settle in with her coloring books and the good crayons, occasionally wandering over to show them her latest creation, and Bryn and Rhodes would work. They made a good team. Rhodes understood the business side, the corporate structure, the relationships and politics within Callahan Industries. Bryn understood the medical side, the clinical trial process, the regulations that govern patient safety. Together, they built a case that was methodical, thorough, and damning. "Look at this email," Rhodes said 3 Saturdays into their routine. He turned his laptop so Bryn could see the screen. "It's from Blake to someone named Robert Chen at Richmond Consulting, dated 2 months ago." Bryn read the message aloud. "Robert, we need to accelerate the timeline. Ethan is asking too many questions about the vendor payments. Can you have the Patterson Group make their final offer by next week? Once the sale goes through, we'll be in the clear." "Who's Ethan?" "That's my middle name. My father used to call me that. Blake is one of the few people at the company who still does. And Richmond Consulting, one of the fake companies Blake set up to funnel money out of Callahan Industries." Bryn pulled up another file on her laptop. "Look, Richmond Consulting received $49,000 payments, always just under the $50,000 threshold that would require board approval. There are dozens of these transactions going back 3 years." Rhodes leaned closer to look at her screen, and Bryn was suddenly very aware of how close he could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, could see the faint scar on his temple from the crash. She forced herself to focus on the data. "Who's the Patterson Group?" she asked, her voice not quite steady. "A venture capital firm that approached us about buying Callahan Industries last year." Rhodes's voice had gone cold. "I said no. The company is my family's legacy. I'm not interested in selling to some faceless corporation, but Blake is. It looks that way. If the company is sold, Blake gets a massive payout, and any evidence of his fraud gets buried in the transition. He wins on both sides." "Mommy," Jade's voice interrupted their intense focus. "Can I have a snack?" "Of course, baby." Bryn started to stand, but Rhodes was already moving. "I've got it. Goldfish or apple slices?" "Both," Jade said hopefully. "Both it is." Bryn watched Rhodes head to his kitchen, watched him pull out the snacks he'd stocked specifically. For Jade, watched him crouch down to her daughter's level to hand them over with a smile. And something in her chest that had been locked tight for 6 years began to crack open. He's good with her, she thought. And more terrifying, Jade is good with him. That evening, after they'd made significant progress on tracking Blake. His financial schemes, after Jade had fallen asleep on Rhodes's couch. Clutching her stuffed elephant, Bryn found herself standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights below. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Rhodes said, coming to stand beside her. "It's easy to forget there's a view like this when you're living paycheck to paycheck in a 4th-floor walk-up. You could have a view like this too, you know." Rhodes's voice was careful, almost hesitant. "If you wanted it." "What do you mean?" "I mean, when this is over, when we've exposed Blake and saved the company, I'm going to need someone to head up medical oversight. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated, who actually cares about patients more than profits. The pay would be substantial, better than nursing, better hours, better benefits." Bryn turned to look at him. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a partnership, someone I can trust to make sure this never happens again. Rhodes, I can't let you give me a position just because I helped you. I'm not giving you anything," he said firmly. "I'm offering you a job you're more than qualified for that my company desperately needs. You have medical expertise, investigative experience, and a commitment to patient safety. That's exactly what Callahan Industries needs to rebuild trust. This isn't charity, Bryn. It's good business." She wanted to say yes, wanted to imagine a life where she didn't have to work double shifts, where she could afford a bigger apartment, where Jade could have her own room and art classes and all the things Bryn couldn't currently give her. But something held her back. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course. No pressure. The offer stands whenever you're ready." They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the city. Then Jade stirred on the couch, murmuring in her sleep. "I should get her home," Bryn said. "It's late. Let me help you carry her to the car." As Rhodes gently lifted Jade into his arms, the little girl's head resting on his shoulder, Bryn felt that crack in her heart widen a little more. This man who was supposed to be just a case, just someone she'd helped in an emergency, was becoming something more. Something dangerous. Because the last time she'd let herself trust someone, let herself believe in promises and partnerships and futures together, she'd ended up alone with a baby and a mountain of debt. But as she watched Rhodes carefully buckle Jade into her car seat, his movements gentle and practiced, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, not everyone left. The following week brought a breakthrough in the investigation. One of Bryn's contacts at a patient advocacy group had connected her with the family of a woman who died during one of Blake's clinical trials. The woman's son had kept meticulous records of his mother's participation, including a journal she'd kept documenting her symptoms. "My mother was so hopeful," the son said over the phone, his voice thick with grief even though the death had been 2 years ago. She thought this trial might give her a few more good years. But within weeks of starting the medication, she was having seizures, terrible headaches. She wrote it all down, told the trial coordinator, but they just kept telling her it was normal, that it would pass. "According to Blake's official report, your mother's death was unrelated to the trial medication," Bryn said gently. "Listed as natural causes from her underlying condition. She was 62 years old and had been stable for 5 years before the trial." The son's voice hardened. There was nothing natural about what happened to her. She seized so violently she broke her own spine. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Bryn meant it with everything in her. "Can you send me copies of her journal and medical records? It could help build a case." "Will it bring her back?" "No, but it might prevent this from happening to someone else's mother." The records arrived 2 days later. Bryn spread them across Rhodes's dining table, her hands shaking as she read the woman's own words describing her deterioration. The headaches that felt like ice picks behind her eyes. The seizures that came without warning. The trial coordinator who kept insisting she was fine, that the medication was working, that she just needed to give it more time. "This is murder," Bryn said flatly. "Maybe not legally, but morally. Blake knew this drug was killing people, and he kept the trial going." Rhodes was pale as he read over her shoulder. "How many others? Based on the pattern, dozens. Maybe more. We need to go public with this." "Not yet. If we go public now, Blake will destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, use his resources to bury us. We need more. We need everything." So they kept digging. More families, more records, more evidence of a man who'd put profit over human life so systematically, so callously, that it took Bryn's breath away. It was during one of these Saturday work sessions that Jade asked the question that changed everything. They'd been working for hours, Jade coloring quietly while the adults pored over medical records and financial statements. Rhodes had ordered Chinese food, and they'd eaten together at his dining table like a family, like people who belonged together. Jade had been unusually quiet during dinner, her small face serious in a way that meant she was thinking hard about something. After they'd finished eating, after Rhodes had cleared the plates and Bryn had returned to her laptop, Jade spoke. "Rhodes, are you going to be my new daddy?" The question fell into the room like a bomb. Bryn's fingers froze on her keyboard. Rhodes, who'd been reviewing a financial statement, went completely still. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. "Jade," Bryn managed, her face burning. "Honey, we've talked about this. Rhodes is our friend. But he's nice to you," Jade insisted with the unassailable logic of a 6-year-old. "And he doesn't yell like Daddy used to. And he bought you those flowers because he said you work too hard and deserve pretty things." Oh God. Rhodes had sent flowers to the hospital after Bryn had pulled a triple shift. Just a simple bouquet with a card that said, "Thank you for everything you do." She hadn't realized Jade had noticed. Hadn't realized her daughter was putting pieces together. "Jade." Rhodes looked at Bryn, clearly at a loss. "Baby." Bryn tried again, pulling Jade onto her lap. "Rhodes is our friend. A very good friend who's helping Mommy with important work. But that doesn't mean—" "I would be honored to be part of your family," Rhodes said quietly. Both Bryn and Jade turned to stare at him. "If your mom wanted that," Rhodes continued, his eyes on Bryn now. "If you both wanted that. But there's no rush, no pressure. Right now we're friends working together to help people. And that's okay. That's more than okay." Jade seemed satisfied with this answer, wiggling off Bryn's lap to return to her coloring. But the question hung in the air between the adults long after the little girl had refocused on her crayons. "I'm sorry," Bryn said later. She was packing up to leave. "She's been asking about fathers since her friend's dad came to career day at school. I've explained that families come in all shapes, but she's at the age where she notices she's different from other kids." "Don't apologize," Rhodes said. "She's amazing, Bryn. You're both amazing. They stood in his entryway, Jade already asleep on Bryn's shoulder, and the moment felt weighted with all the things neither of them was saying. When this is over, Rhodes started. Don't. Bryn interrupted softly. Don't make promises about after. Let's just focus on now. But 3 days later, now exploded in their faces. Bryn was leaving the hospital after her evening shift when she noticed the black SUV. It was parked in the employee lot, windows tinted dark, engine running. Every instinct she'd honed over years of dealing with dangerous situations started screaming. She reached for her phone, but before she could dial, 2 men in suits got out of the vehicle. They moved with the practiced efficiency of people who did this professionally, cutting off her path to her car. "Ms. Torres," the taller one said, "we need you to come with us." "I don't think so." Bryn's hand tightened on her phone. "Who are you? This can be easy or hard, but either way, you're getting in the car." Bryn turned to run, but the second man was already moving to block her. She drove her knee into his groin, a move she'd learned in the self-defense classes she'd taken after her ex-husband's last threatening visit. The man doubled over with a curse. She ran, her heart hammering, her only thought, Jade. She had to get to Jade. Her daughter was at after-school care, safe for now. But if these men were connected to Blake... The second man caught her before she'd gone 10 feet, his arm locking around her waist. She screamed, fought, bit down hard on his hand until she tasted blood. He swore and loosened his grip just enough for her to break free. But there were more men emerging from the SUV now. Too many to fight. Bryn fumbled for her phone, managed to dial Rhodes's number with shaking fingers. "Rhodes," she gasped out before someone ripped the phone from her hands. Then a cloth pressed over her mouth and nose, and the chemical smell was the last thing she registered before the world went dark. When she woke, she was in the warehouse office, zip-tied to a chair, and Blake Donovan was smiling at her across the desk like they were meeting for coffee instead of a kidnapping. This brings us back to where we started, to the moment when everything Bryn had fought for, everything she'd built and protected and loved, hung in the balance of one man's greed. "Where's my daughter?" she snarled, pulling against the zip ties hard enough to cut into her wrists. "Your daughter is safe at her after-school program," Blake said pleasantly. "For now, whether she stays safe depends entirely on you. If you touch her, I won't need to touch her if you do exactly what I say." Blake leaned forward, and Bryn saw the cold calculation in his eyes, the eyes of a man who'd killed 43 people and felt no remorse. "You're going to call Rhodes Callahan and tell him you've made a mistake. The clinical trial data you've been collecting is inaccurate. You're dropping the investigation, and if I refuse, then Jade will have a very tragic accident. Children are so vulnerable, aren't they? A car accident, a house fire, an abduction by a non-custodial parent who suddenly shows up after years of absence." The threat was specific enough to steal Bryn's breath. Blake had done his homework. He knew about Jade's father, about the house fire, about every fear Bryn carried. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" she asked, her mind racing. "How do I know you won't hurt her anyway? Because killing a 6-year-old brings the kind of police attention even I can't manage. But if you continue interfering in my business, I'll have no choice. You've already cost me too much." A phone rang. Blake's cell. He answered, listened, and his expression darkened. "I see. Thank you." He hung up and looked at Bryn with new calculation. "Rhodes Callahan just showed up at your daughter's school with a team of lawyers and private security. Very clever of him to move so fast." Relief flooded through Bryn so powerfully she felt dizzy. Jade was safe. Whatever happened to her, her daughter was protected. Rhodes had heard her say his name on the phone, and he'd known. He'd understood, and he'd acted. "He cares about you," Blake observed. "How sweet. Tell me, Miss Torres, how much is Rhodes willing to sacrifice for you? His company, his reputation, his life. Leave him alone. This is between you and me. No, this is between me and $100 million in research sales and buyout money." Blake stood, walking around the desk to look down at her. "Rhodes is just an obstacle. You're just leverage. And that little girl is just insurance. You won't get away with this. I already have." Blake smiled. 43 times I've gotten away with it. What's a few more?" The door burst open before Bryn could respond. Rhodes stood in the doorway with 3 FBI agents, their weapons drawn, their faces grim. "Game over, Blake," Rhodes said, his voice cold and deadly in a way Bryn had never heard before. "The FBI has been monitoring this building since you made your first phone call to your associates." Blake lunged for Bryn, pulling a gun from his desk drawer with shocking speed. But Rhodes was faster. He tackled Blake to the ground as the FBI agents moved in, and within seconds it was over. An agent cut Bryn's zip ties while Rhodes pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. But she didn't care. She wrapped her arms around him and held on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to destroy her. "Jade," she gasped against his chest. "Safe. At my penthouse with my security team and a very nice nanny who's probably spoiling her rotten right now." Rhodes pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands gentle as he checked her for injuries. "I got your call. Heard you say my name, and I knew. I tracked your phone to this location and called the FBI. You saved me. You saved me first. I'm just returning the favor." As the FBI led Blake away, reading him his rights for kidnapping, assault, fraud, and attempted murder, Bryn finally let herself shake. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her trembling and exhausted and desperate to see her daughter. "I need to see Jade," she said. "I need to hold her." Rhodes kept his arm around her as they left the warehouse, as they got into his car as they drove through the city to his penthouse. And Bryn let him. Let herself lean on someone for the first time in 6 years. Let herself trust that he wasn't going to disappear or let her down or prove that she'd been a fool to believe. 20 minutes later, Bryn was wrapped around Jade on Rhodes's couch while her daughter chattered about the really nice lady who'd given her ice cream and let her watch princess movies. "I told her you were helping Rhodes with important work," Jade said seriously. "And she said you were very brave. Are you brave, Mommy?" "I try to be, baby." "You are," Rhodes said from across the room, where he was giving them space but staying close. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." That night, after Jade had finally fallen asleep in the guest room that Rhodes had somehow already prepared for, her complete with stuffed animals and nightlights, Bryn and Rhodes sat on his balcony overlooking the city. The investigation was over. The FBI had found enough evidence in Blake's files to put him away for life. The falsified trial data, the murdered patients, the stolen research, the attempted murder of Rhodes. It was all documented, all admissible, all over. "What happens now?" Bryn asked. "Now, I rebuild the company," Rhodes said. "Callahan Industries needs to regain public trust, compensate the families who were hurt, create new oversight systems to make sure this never happens again. That's going to take years. I know, but it's worth it." He turned to look at her. "And that job offer still stands. Head of medical oversight, making sure our trials are ethical and our data is accurate. The pay would be better than nursing. The hours more flexible for Jade." "Rhodes, let me finish." He took a breath. "I know the timing is terrible. I know you need time after everything that just happened. But I need to say this before I lose my nerve." "Say what?" "I'm in love with you, Bryn." The words hung in the night air between them, and Bryn felt her heart stutter. "I have been since you pulled me from that car," Rhodes continued. "Maybe before that. Maybe from the moment you told me you'd help even though you had every reason to walk away. I love your strength, your compassion, your dedication to your daughter. I love how you fight for what's right even when it's dangerous." He met her eyes. "And I love Jade like she's already my own." "Rhodes," Bryn whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know the timing is terrible. I know you need space after everything. But when Jade asked if I was going to be her new daddy, I realized I wanted that more than I've ever wanted anything. Not just to be her father, but to be your partner, your husband, if you'll have me." "I'm a mess," Bryn said, laughing through her tears. "I'm a single mom with trust issues and student debt, and a traumatized 6-year-old. You're a billionaire CEO who could have anyone. I don't want anyone. I want you." She kissed him then. Poured 6 weeks of denied attraction, terror, gratitude, and love into that single moment. When they broke apart, they were both crying. "I love you too," she whispered. "I fought it because it seemed impossible, because I was scared, because I thought you'd leave like everyone else. But I love you, Rhodes. I'm not going anywhere," he said fiercely. "Neither is Jade. We're in this together." From inside the penthouse, they heard a small voice call out, "Mommy." Bryn went to comfort her daughter, and Rhodes followed, unable to stay away. They found Jade sitting up in the guest bed, rubbing her eyes, her stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. "I had a dream," the little girl said. "We lived in the castle with Rhodes and we were happy." "That's a nice dream, baby," Bryn said, smoothing Jade's hair. "Was it just a dream?" Bryn looked at Rhodes, saw the love and hope in his eyes, and made a decision that would change all their lives. "No, sweetheart." She pulled Jade into her arms. I think maybe it was real. 18 months later, Bryn woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom. Windows of the house she still couldn't quite believe was hers. Not a cramped studio apartment with paper-thin walls. Not a place where she had to choose between heat and groceries, but a real house with a yard and enough bedrooms that Jade didn't have to sleep on a fold-out couch anymore. She rolled over to find Rhodes already awake, watching her with that expression he got sometimes, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "What?" she murmured, still drowsy. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." "You're lucky. I'm the one who went from a fourth-floor walk-up to this." She gestured at the spacious bedroom with its vaulted ceilings and French doors leading to a private balcony. "We're both lucky," Rhodes said, pulling her closer. "Which is why I think we should make it official." It took a moment for his words to register. Then Bryn sat up, suddenly very awake. Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "Not yet," Rhodes smiled. "When I propose, you'll know. This is more of a pre-proposal conversation, making sure we're on the same page." "And what page is that?" "The page where we spend the rest of our lives together, where I adopt Jade legally so she has a father who will never leave, where we build something permanent." He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I want to marry you, Bryn. I want Jade to be my daughter. I want whatever future we can build together, but only if that's what you want too." Bryn felt tears prick her eyes. 6 months ago she would have said no, would have protected herself and Jade from the possibility of disappointment. But 6 months of Rhodes showing up every single day, of him being patient with Jade's nightmares, of him holding Bryn when she woke up shaking from dreams of the warehouse, had taught her something. Not everyone leaves. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want that too." "Good." Rhodes kissed her softly. "Then I guess I should start planning." Over the next few weeks, Bryn watched Rhodes become increasingly secretive. He would take phone calls in another room. He enlisted Jade as a co-conspirator, and the two of them would huddle together whispering and giggling. And Bryn, who'd spent years hyper-vigilant and suspicious, found herself simply trusting. It was a revelation, this trust, this ability to let go and believe that good things could happen without her controlling every detail. Her work at Callahan Industries had been transformative, both for the company and for herself. As head of medical oversight, she'd implemented protocols that made their clinical trials the gold standard in the pharmaceutical industry. Every trial now had independent oversight. Every adverse event was reported immediately. Every patient's voice mattered. The families of Blake's victims had been compensated. It couldn't bring back their loved ones, but it acknowledged the wrong that had been done. Several of those families had become advocates, themselves working with Bryn to create the Locke Foundation. Named after Rhodes's family, the foundation provided support for victims of corporate malfeasance and funded ethical medical research. "I never thought I'd be doing this kind of work," Bryn had confessed to Rhodes one evening as they reviewed foundation applications. "Making a difference on this scale." "You were always making a difference," he'd replied. "Now you just have more resources to do it." The proposal happened on a Tuesday. Bryn had worked a full day at Callahan Industries, reviewing data from a new Parkinson trial that showed genuine promise without any of the red flags she'd learned to spot. She'd picked Jade up from school, listening to her daughter chatter about the science project she was working on with her best friend. They'd stopped for groceries, and Bryn had been mentally planning dinner when Rhodes called. "Can you and Jade meet me at the park?" he asked. "The one where we had our first real conversation. Now. It's a school night, and I have salmon defrosting and—" "Please, Bryn. It's important." Something in his voice made her agree. 20 minutes later, she and Jade were walking through the city park, following the path toward the bench where Rhodes had first told her about Blake's fraud, where she'd first decided to help him. The park looked different. There were lights strung through the trees, tiny white bulbs that turned the pathway into something magical. Rose petals scattered on the ground leading toward the bench, and Rhodes standing there in a suit holding Jade's hand. "Wait," Bryn said, stopping in her tracks. "Jade was with me. How are you?" "I picked her up from school," Rhodes said, his smile both nervous and excited. "Hope you don't mind. We had some important errands to run." "What's going on?" Jade ran to her mother, bouncing with barely contained excitement. Mommy, watch. This is the best part." Rhodes walked toward them, and that's when Bryn saw what he was carrying. a small box in his free hand. And suddenly she couldn't breathe. "Bryn Torres," Rhodes began, then paused. "Actually, I need to do this in the right order." He turned to Jade. "Do you remember what we talked about?" Jade nodded solemnly, her dark eyes shining. She took the box from Rhodes and opened it to reveal not one ring but two. One was clearly an engagement ring, a stunning diamond that caught the light from the strings overhead. The other was smaller, delicate, with a tiny heart-shaped stone. Rhodes dropped to one knee in front of Jade first. "Jade Torres, you are the bravest, kindest, most wonderful kid I've ever met. Your mom raised you to be strong and smart and caring, and I would be honored if you'll let me to be your dad. Not to replace anyone, but to be someone you can count on. Someone who will show up to every school play and science fair and soccer game. Someone who will love you unconditionally for the rest of your life." He held up the smaller ring. "Will you let me adopt you? Will you be my daughter?" Jade was crying now, nodding frantically. "Yes, yes, I want you to be my daddy." Rhodes slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a tight hug. Then he turned to Bryn, still on one knee, and pulled out the second ring. Bryn was openly sobbing now, not even trying to hide the tears streaming down her face. "Bryn Torres," Rhodes said, his own voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life on a rainy highway, but that was just the beginning. You saved me from loneliness I didn't even know I had. You saved me from becoming the kind of man who values money over people. You showed me what courage really looks like. It's a single mom working double shifts and still finding energy to read bedtime stories. It's a woman who sees injustice and fights back even when it's dangerous. It's someone who gives trust even after trust has been shattered." He held up the ring, and in the fairy lights it sparkled like captured stars. "I love you with everything I am. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love how you protect what matters. I love watching you be an amazing mother. I love that you call me out when I'm being too focused on work and that you cry during animated movies and that you still keep a go bag in your car because being prepared makes you feel safe." Bryn laughed through her tears. "You notice that? I notice everything about you." Rhodes smiled. "I want to spend the rest of my life noticing things about you. I want to grow old with you, raise Jade together, maybe add to our family if you want that. I want to be your partner in everything. Bryn Torres, will you marry me?" For a moment, Bryn couldn't speak. She looked at this man kneeling in front of her, at her daughter wearing a ring that symbolized family and permanence, at the life they'd built from the ashes of trauma and fear. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Rhodes slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and kissed her while Jade cheered and clapped. Around them, Bryn suddenly noticed there were other people. Jerome from Callahan Industries, Rhodes's mother who'd become a surrogate, grandmother to Jade, a few close friends they'd made over the past months. All of them smiling, all of them celebrating. "You planned all this," Bryn said, looking around in wonder. "Jade helped," Rhodes admitted. "She's excellent at keeping secrets when properly motivated." "He bribed me with ice cream," Jade announced proudly. "And he let me pick the flowers. Best co-conspirator ever," Rhodes said, ruffling her hair. The wedding was 3 months later. Bryn had initially wanted something simple, just a courthouse ceremony with a few witnesses. But Rhodes's mother had gently suggested that Jade might enjoy being part of a real wedding. And once Bryn saw how excited her daughter was about wearing a fancy dress and scattering flower petals, she couldn't say no. They compromised on something small but beautiful, an outdoor ceremony in the same park where Rhodes had proposed. 50 guests, mostly close friends and colleagues and the families from the Locke Foundation who'd become part of their extended community. Jade is the flower girl, wearing a dress she'd helped pick out, carrying a basket of rose petals and taking her job very seriously. Rhodes wore a classic tux. Bryn wore a simple ivory dress that made her feel like a princess. And when they exchanged vows under an arch covered in flowers, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. "I promise to love you in the boring, everyday moments as much as the dramatic ones," Rhodes said, holding both her hands. "I promise to be a partner who shows up, who listens, who fights for us when things get hard. I promise to be the father Jade deserves and the husband you deserve. I promise to never take for granted the gift of your trust." Bryn took a shaky breath. "I promise to let you love me, even when I'm scared. I promise to be honest with you, even when it's hard. I promise to build a life with you that's based on truth and partnership and showing up for each other. I promise to love your family as my own and to create a home where all of us feel safe and seen." "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said. "You may kiss your bride." And as Rhodes kissed her, as Jade ran up to hug them both, as their friends and family cheered, Bryn thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a burning car to a beautiful wedding. From desperation to joy. From loneliness to love. The reception was held in Rhodes's mother's garden. There was dancing and cake and toasts that made everyone laugh and cry. Jade stayed up way past her bedtime, spinning in circles with other children, and stealing bites of wedding cake when she thought no one was looking. "Can I make a toast?" Jade announced suddenly, climbing onto a chair with the fearlessness only a 6-year-old possesses. "Of course, sweetheart," Bryn said, equal parts proud and terrified of what her daughter might say. Jade held up her juice cup, like she'd seen the adults doing with champagne. "I just want to say that I love my new daddy and my mommy, and I'm really happy we're a family now, because before, it was just me and mommy, and that was good. But now it's all 3 of us, and that's even better." She said it with such simple honesty that half the audience started crying again. Rhodes pulled Jade into his arms, holding her tight while Bryn leaned against them both, and for a moment, the whole world was perfect. The honeymoon was a week in the Caribbean, just the 3 of them. Jade learned to snorkel and built elaborate sandcastles and declared that she wanted to live at the beach forever. Rhodes taught her to identify different types of shells. Bryn read trashy novels on the beach and felt the last of her constant vigilance finally relax. One evening, after Jade had fallen asleep in her adjoining hotel room, Bryn and Rhodes sat on their balcony watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. "I have something to tell you," Bryn said, her heart racing. Rhodes turned to her immediately, reading the seriousness in her tone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think it's wrong." She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Rhodes just stared at her. Then, his face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. "Really? We're having a baby." Bryn laughed at his expression. "I found out yesterday. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." Rhodes pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of something precious and breakable. I don't even have words." "How far along?" "About 8 weeks. I have an appointment scheduled for next week." She pulled back to look at his face. "Are you happy?" "I know we hadn't really discussed the timeline for—" "I'm ecstatic," Rhodes interrupted. "Terrified and ecstatic, and so incredibly happy I might burst." "We need to tell Jade carefully," Bryn said, already thinking ahead. "Make sure she doesn't feel replaced or less important. We'll tell her together. Make her part of it. She's going to be an amazing big sister." They told Jade 2 days later, sitting together on the beach while the sun set behind them. "Jade, honey, Mommy has some news," Bryn began. She'd been nervous about this conversation, worried that Jade might feel threatened by the idea of sharing her newly formed family. "Are we getting a puppy?" Jade asked hopefully. "Not exactly." Bryn took her daughter's hand. "You're going to be a big sister. I'm going to have a baby." Jade's eyes went wide. "A real baby. A real baby." Rhodes nodded. "In about 7 months." For a moment, Jade was quiet, processing. Then she asked, very seriously, "Will you still love me when the baby comes?" "Oh, sweetheart." Bryn pulled her daughter close. "We will love you exactly the same. Having another baby doesn't mean we love you less. It means our family gets bigger. Our love gets bigger. You'll always be my first daughter," Rhodes added. "The one who taught me how to be a dad. Nothing will ever change that." "Can I help with the baby?" Jade asked. "Like, help pick a name and stuff?" "Absolutely," Bryn said. "You're going to be very important. Babies need big sisters to teach them things and protect them, and show them how the world works." Jade considered this. "Okay, I think I'll be a good big sister, but can we still get a puppy too?" "We'll talk about it," Rhodes said, which was his standard response when he wasn't ready to say no. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Bryn continued working at Callahan Industries through her 2nd trimester, implementing new protocols and mentoring junior staff. She'd found that she loved teaching, loved passing on the skills that had served her so well. The foundation flourished. They'd helped 23 families in the first year alone, providing legal assistance, financial support, and most importantly, validation that their suffering mattered. Several of those families became advocates themselves, speaking at conferences and lobbying for stronger regulations. "I never thought corporate work could feel meaningful," Bryn confessed to Rhodes. One evening as they assembled a crib in what would be the baby's room. But knowing that every protocol I put in place could prevent another Blake Donovan, another family destroyed by greed. It matters. You matter, Rhodes corrected. You took something terrible and transformed it into something that protects people. That's not just meaningful, Bryn. That's heroic. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who couldn't walk away. That's exactly what makes you a hero. They found out they were having another girl at the 20-week ultrasound. Jade was thrilled, declaring that boys were boring anyway, and now she'd have a sister to play with. What should we name her? Bryn asked that evening at dinner. It had become a family ritual, tossing around name ideas while they ate. Princess Sparkle Unicorn, Jade suggested immediately. Maybe something a little more traditional, Rhodes said diplomatically. But they went through dozens of names over the following weeks. Nothing felt quite right until one evening when Bryn was reading to Jade before bed. They were reading a story about a girl who brought light to a dark kingdom, and Jade asked, "Mommy, what's the opposite of sad?" "Happy," Bryn said. "Or maybe hopeful." Jade considered this. "I like hopeful. Because even when things are scary, you can still hope they get better." And that's when Bryn knew. "Hope," she said to Rhodes that night. "What do you think about naming her Hope?" "Hope Callahan." Rhodes tested the name. "I love it." "But why?" "Because this baby represents everything we hoped for, but didn't dare believe could happen. Because her existence proves that happy endings are real. Because I want her to carry that into the world. Hope. Hope Jade Callahan," Rhodes amended, with Jade as her middle name. "So our girls are connected." Bryn felt tears well up, as they did so often these days. Hormones, she told herself. But it was more than that. It was gratitude. It was joy. It was the overwhelming emotion of having something precious you never expected to receive. If you're loving this story, if it's touching your heart or making you believe in second chances, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that happy endings are possible. And drop a comment below telling me which moment has resonated most with you. Your engagement helps me bring more stories like this to life. The third trimester brought the usual discomforts. Swollen ankles, sleepless nights, and the general feeling of being a planet. But it also brought unexpected joys. Jade talking to her baby sister through Bryn's belly, telling her about school and her friends and how excited she was to meet her. Rhodes reading parenting books with the same intensity he brought to business reports. His mother knitting tiny sweaters and crying happy tears every time she felt the baby kick. They prepared the nursery together. Soft yellow walls that Jade helped paint. A mobile of stars and moons hanging over the crib. Shelves filled with books waiting to be read. A rocking chair where Bryn could nurse and Rhodes could give bottles and Jade could sit and tell stories. "It's perfect," Jade declared, surveying their work. "Hope is going to love it." Bryn worked until her 36th week, then reluctantly agreed to maternity leave. Jerome had been promoted to acting head of medical oversight during her absence, and she trusted him completely. But it was still hard to step away, even temporarily. "You've built something that doesn't collapse without you," Rhodes reminded her. "That's the sign of a good leader. You've trained people, created systems, established a culture. It'll be here when you're ready to come back." "What if I don't want to come back full-time?" Bryn asked. "What if I want to work part-time, spend more time with the girls when they're young?" "Then that's what you do." "We're fortunate enough that you have choices, Bryn. Choose whatever makes you happy." That conversation, more than anything else, made Bryn realize how far she'd come. From a woman who had to work double shifts just to afford rent and daycare, to someone who could actually choose, who had a partner who supported whatever she decided, who valued her happiness as much as her income. Hope Jade Callahan was born on a sunny Tuesday morning, 3 days before her due date. Bryn's water broke at 6 a.m., and by 6:15 they were racing. To the hospital with Jade in the back seat asking a million questions. Is the baby coming now? Does it hurt? Can I watch? Will Hope have hair? What if she doesn't like me? "The baby is coming soon," Bryn said, breathing through a contraction. "Yes, it hurts, but in a good way. No, you can't watch the actual birth, but you can meet her right after. She'll probably have hair, and she's going to love you because you're going to be the best big sister ever." Labor progressed quickly. Too quickly, the nurses joked, for a second baby. By 10 a.m., Bryn was fully dilated. By 10:30, she was pushing. And at 10:47, Hope Jade Callahan entered the world with a cry that sounded indignant as if she was personally offended by the eviction from her warm, dark home. "She's perfect," Rhodes said, tears streaming down his face as the nurse placed their daughter on Bryn's chest. "You're both perfect." Bryn looked down at Hope, this tiny miracle with a head full of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn blue like her father's. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs that clearly worked just fine based on the volume of her cries. "Hi, baby girl," Bryn whispered. "We've been waiting for you." They brought Jade in 30 minutes later, after Bryn had been cleaned up and Hope had nursed for the first time. The 7-year-old approached cautiously, as if her new sister might break. "You can come closer," Rhodes encouraged. "Hope wants to meet you." Jade climbed onto the hospital bed carefully, peering at the bundle in Bryn's arms. "She's so small," Jade breathed. "And she has hair like Mommy." "Would you like to hold her?" Bryn asked. "Really? I can hold her. With some help. Here, let me show you." They positioned Jade carefully, supporting Hope's head, making sure everything was secure. And then Jade was holding her baby sister, looking down at that tiny face with an expression of pure wonder. "Hi, Hope," Jade whispered. "I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything. How to tie your shoes and how to draw flowers and how to be brave. I'm going to protect you and love you forever." Rhodes had his phone out, capturing the moment. But Bryn knew she didn't need a photograph to remember this. The image was seared into her heart. Her 2 daughters, the family she'd never dared dream she could have, all together and safe and loved. Over the next few days, they settled into the chaos of life with a newborn. Sleepless nights and endless diaper changes and the particular exhaustion that comes from keeping a tiny human alive. But there was joy, too. Hope's first smile, probably gas, but Bryn didn't care. Jade singing lullabies she made up on the spot. Rhodes pacing the floor at 3 a.m. with Hope on his shoulder, both of them half asleep. One evening, when Hope was 3 weeks old, the whole family was together in the nursery. Bryn in the rocking chair nursing Hope. Rhodes sitting on the floor with Jade, helping her with homework. And Bryn felt a wave of contentment so powerful it took her breath away. "What are you thinking about?" Rhodes asked, noticing her expression. "Just this," Bryn said. "All of us together. 2 years ago I was alone with Jade, working constantly, afraid of everything. And now you have us," Rhodes finished. "And we have you, and we're never letting go." "Mommy," Jade said suddenly, "can you tell me the story again, about how you saved Rhodes?" It had become Jade's favorite bedtime story. Better than any fairy tale, she claimed, because it was real, because it was about her family. "Once upon a time," Bryn began, the familiar words comforting in their repetition. "There was a single mom driving home in the rain. And she was tired," Jade chimed in, knowing the story by heart. So tired. She'd worked a long shift at the hospital, and she just wanted to get home to her daughter. But then she saw a car crash. A terrible crash with fire and smoke. "Did she keep driving?" Jade asked, even though she knew the answer. "No, baby." She stopped. Even though it was scary, even though she had every reason to keep going, she stopped. Because sometimes the most important thing you can do is help someone, even when it's hard. And she pulled Rhodes out of the fire, just in time. The car exploded right after they got away, and Rhodes was hurt, but he was alive. "Because Mommy saved him," Jade said proudly. "And then what happened?" Rhodes prompted, his eyes on Bryn. "Then Rhodes and Mommy became friends," Bryn continued. "They worked together to help other people who'd been hurt. They got to know each other, and slowly they fell in love. And Rhodes became my daddy," Jade added. "Best decision I ever made," Rhodes said, reaching over to squeeze Jade's hand. "And now we have Hope," Jade concluded. "So Mommy saving Rhodes gave us our whole family." "That's exactly right," Bryn said. As Jade returned to her homework and Hope dozed in Bryn's arms, Rhodes caught Bryn's eye across the nursery. They smiled at each other, the smile of 2 people who'd found something rare and precious and were determined to protect it. The first year with Hope passed in a blur of milestones. First smile, first laugh, first tooth, first word, which was, to Jade's delight, "Da" for her big sister. Bryn returned to work part-time at Callahan Industries, finding a balance that allowed her to be present for her daughters while still doing work that mattered. The foundation expanded its reach, helping families across 3 states now. They'd lobbied successfully for stronger clinical trial regulations. They'd created scholarships for children who'd lost parents to pharmaceutical negligence. They'd turned tragedy into something that actively prevented future tragedies. Rhodes had been approached multiple times about selling Callahan Industries. Every offer was met with the same response. Not for sale. This is a family company, and we're in it for the long haul. We're here to help people, not maximize shareholder value. On Hope's first birthday, they had a small party in their backyard. The same backyard where Rhodes had built Jade the treehouse she'd wanted. Where they'd installed a swing set for both girls. Where they gathered on summer evenings for family dinners while fireflies danced in the growing darkness. Make a wish, Jade instructed her baby sister, who was more interested in smashing her cake than eating it. I don't think she understands wishes yet, Bryn laughed. Then I'll wish for her, Jade declared. I wish that Hope grows up knowing she's loved and safe, and that her family will always be here. Rhodes pulled Bryn close, both of them watching their daughters. That's a pretty good wish. The best wish, Bryn agreed. That night, after both girls were asleep, Bryn and Rhodes sat on their back porch. It had become their ritual, this quiet time together after the chaos of the day had settled. Time to reconnect, to remember they were partners before they were parents. Do you ever think about that night? Rhodes asked. The crash. All the time, Bryn admitted. Not the scary parts anymore, but the choice. The moment when I had to decide whether to stop or keep driving. What made you stop? Bryn thought about it. I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. And I think at the core, it was knowing that I could help. I had the training, the skills, the courage. And if I kept driving, if I chose safety over service, I'd have to live with that. I'd rather face danger than face the mirror knowing I walked away. You saved my life. You saved mine too, just in a different way. Bryn turned to look at him. I was surviving before I met you, Rhodes. Working and parenting and getting through each day. But I wasn't really living. I was too scared to hope for anything better, too focused on just keeping us afloat. You showed me that life could be more than just surviving. We saved each other then. We saved each other. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the stars come out over their home. Their beautiful, imperfect, precious life. I want to tell you something, Bryn said eventually. I've been thinking about expanding the foundation, creating a program specifically for single parents who want to go back to school or change careers but can't afford to. Scholarships, childcare assistance, mentorship. All the things I wish I'd had when I was struggling. That's a beautiful idea, Rhodes said. What do you need from me? Just your support, and maybe some help with the logistics. I want to call it the Second Chances Initiative. Perfect. When do we start? They started planning the next day. Within 6 months, the Second Chances Initiative had awarded its first 10 scholarships. Single mothers and fathers who were working minimum wage jobs but dreamed of nursing degrees or teaching certificates or business careers. People who just needed someone to believe in them and provide the resources to try. One of the first recipients was a woman named Angela, a single mother of 2 who'd been working as a housekeeper but wanted to become a nurse. Her thank you letter made Bryn cry. You don't just give money, Angela wrote. You give hope. You show people like me that our circumstances don't define our futures, that it's never too late to change our stories. That letter went on Bryn's office wall, right next to the photo of her pulling Rhodes from the burning car, taken by a passerby and later printed in the newspaper. The photo that had started everything. The years passed with a particular speed that comes when life is full and happy. Jade grew from a 7-year-old to a bright, compassionate 10-year-old who wanted to be a doctor so she could help people like her mom did. Hope grew from a baby to a toddler to a preschooler with her father's blue eyes and her mother's fierce determination. Blake Donovan's trial had resulted in a life sentence without possibility of parole. 43 counts of negligent homicide, fraud, attempted murder, kidnapping. He'd tried to make deals, to trade information for reduced sentences, but there was no deal generous enough to overcome the mountain of evidence against him. The families of his victims had testified at his sentencing. One by one, they'd stood up and told the court about the mothers, fathers, siblings, children they'd lost, about the lies they'd been told, about the pain of knowing their loved ones had died not for science or progress, but for profit. Bryn had testified too, not about the kidnapping, though that was part of the record, but about the pattern of fraud she'd uncovered, about the systematic way Blake had falsified data, endangered lives, and betrayed the trust of vulnerable patients. When the judge handed down the sentence, life without parole, Bryn had felt not triumph but sadness. Sadness for all the lives lost, for the potential that had been destroyed. for the fact that it had taken so long for justice to arrive. But she'd also felt hope, because the protocols she'd put in place, the foundation she'd built, the people she'd trained, they were all preventing the next Blake Donovan. They were protecting patients, demanding transparency, insisting that human lives mattered more than quarterly profits. On Bryn and Rhodes's 5th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows. It wasn't necessary, legally or symbolically, but they wanted to stand in front of their daughters and their community and recommit to the promises they'd made. They returned to the park where Rhodes had proposed, where they'd been married, but this time, Jade and Hope were part of the ceremony. Jade, now 12 and already showing signs of the remarkable woman she'd become, read a poem she'd written about family, about how the best families aren't just born, they're built, how love is a choice you make every single day. Hope, 5 years old and full of questions about everything, held the rings. She took her job very seriously, presenting them with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for heads of state. And Bryn and Rhodes spoke new vows, not just to each other but to their daughters, to their community, to the future they were building together. "I promise to keep showing up," Rhodes said, "in the big moments and the small ones, when it's exciting and when it's boring, when you need me and when you just want someone nearby. I promise to keep fighting," Bryn said, "for what's right, for what's fair, for the people who can't fight for themselves, and to teach our daughters to do the same. I promise to love you even when you're grumpy," Jade added, making everyone laugh. "I promise to share my toys," Hope contributed, which was perhaps the biggest sacrifice a 5-year-old could offer. That evening, at the reception held in their backyard, Rhodes's mother pulled Bryn aside. "I need to tell you something," she said. Bryn looked at the older woman with concern. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect. That's what I need to tell you. When Rhodes's father died, when Rhodes took over the company so young, I was worried he'd become consumed by work, that he'd sacrifice his life for business, that he'd end up alone." She took Bryn's hands. "But then you came along. You saved my son in every way a person can be saved, and you gave me granddaughters I adore. Thank you, Bryn. Thank you for stopping that night. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for loving my boy." Bryn hugged her mother-in-law, both of them crying happy tears. "I'm the lucky one," she whispered. "He gave me a family I never thought I'd have." "You gave each other a family," Rhodes's mother corrected. "That's what makes it so beautiful." As the party continued around them, as their friends and family celebrated, Bryn took a moment to simply observe. Jade was teaching Hope how to dance, both girls laughing as they spun in circles. Rhodes was talking with Jerome and other colleagues from Callahan Industries, probably discussing work but smiling as he did it. The families from the foundation were there, people whose lives had been touched by tragedy but who were rebuilding with support and community. And Bryn realized something. She'd spent so many years afraid of trusting, afraid of hoping, afraid that anything good would be taken away. But fear hadn't protected her. It had just made her lonely. Courage was what had saved her. Courage to stop on that rainy highway. Courage to investigate corporate fraud. Courage to fall in love again. Courage to believe that happy endings weren't just for other people. Rhodes appeared at her side, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "Just how far we've come," Bryn said. "From a car crash to this. Best crash of my life," Rhodes said. "Too soon," Bryn laughed. "But also, yeah, best crash of my life too." When Hope was 6 and Jade was 13, they sat down as a family to record their story for the Foundation's Oral History Project. The idea was to capture stories of survival, resilience, and transformation, to show people that terrible things could lead to beautiful outcomes. "Tell me how you met," the interviewer asked, camera rolling. "I crashed my car," Rhodes said simply, "and Bryn saved my life." "But that's not the whole story," Jade interjected, "because Rhodes also saved Mommy's life, just in a different way." "How so?" the interviewer asked. Jade looked at her mother. Mommy was really tired before Rhodes, like tired in her heart, not just her body. She worked all the time and worried all the time, and she was sad even though she tried to hide it from me. But after Rhodes, she smiled more. She laughed more. She wasn't scared all the time. Bryn felt tears well up. "Baby, I didn't know you noticed all that." "I noticed everything," Jade said softly. "I was little, but I remember. And I remember thinking that Rhodes made you happy, that he made us safe." "Hope, what do you think about your family?" the interviewer asked the 6-year-old. I think we're lucky, Hope said seriously. Because we love each other, and love is the most important thing. Out of the mouths of babes, Rhodes murmured, pulling Hope onto his lap. The interview continued, covering the investigation, the danger, the trial, the foundation. But the part that aired most often, that people shared and quoted and held up as an example, was that simple statement from a 6-year-old. Love is the most important thing. As the girls grew older, the story of how their parents met became legendary in their social circles. Friends would beg Jade and Hope to tell it. How their mom had literally pulled their dad from a burning car. How she'd helped catch a criminal. How they'd fallen in love while fighting for justice. It's like a movie, one of Jade's friends said dreamily. It's better than a movie, Jade replied, because it's real, and because my parents aren't perfect. They argue sometimes about boring stuff like who forgot to buy milk or whether we can get a dog, but they always work it out. They always choose each other. The choice to choose each other day after day, that was the real story. Not the dramatic rescue or the corporate conspiracy, but the decision to build a life together, to show up for morning coffee and bedtime stories, to support each other's dreams, to parent as a team, to love intentionally. On Bryn's 40th birthday, Rhodes surprised her with a video he'd been compiling for months. It featured testimonials from people whose lives had been touched by her work, families from the foundation, colleagues from Callahan Industries, recipients of Second Chances scholarships. One by one, they spoke about what Bryn meant to them. She gave me hope when I had none. Angela, the former housekeeper turned registered nurse, said, she showed me that my past didn't determine my future. She taught me that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing, Jerome said. Every protocol she implemented, every safeguard she created, it all came from a place of genuine care for patients. She's my hero, Jade said in her segment. Not because she's perfect, but because she's brave. Because even when she's scared, she does the hard thing, the right thing. She taught me that families come in all shapes, Hope added. And that love is a choice you make every day. And Rhodes, speaking last, she saved my life. But more than that, she showed me what life could be. Not just existing or succeeding, but truly living, building something that matters with people you love. I'm grateful every single day that she stopped on that highway, that she was brave enough to help a stranger, that she gave us, a chance. Bryn watched through tears, overwhelmed by the evidence of a life well lived. She'd started out just trying to survive, to provide for her daughter. She'd never imagined she could impact so many people, could build something that extended far beyond her own family. But here was the proof. Dozens of lives touched, hundreds of patients protected, a family built on love and courage and choice. Thank you, she whispered to Rhodes as the video ended, for seeing me, for choosing me, for building this life with me. Thank you for stopping, he replied, for being brave enough to pull over on a rainy highway and save a stranger. You weren't a stranger for long, Bryn smiled. No, I became family, and that was the truth at the heart of their story. That strangers could become family, that terrible moments could lead to beautiful futures, that courage, even for just 60 seconds, could change everything. As Bryn looked around at her birthday celebration, at her daughters laughing together, at Rhodes watching her, with eyes full of love, at the community they'd built and the lives they'd touched, she felt profound gratitude. Gratitude for the instinct that had made her stop that night, for the skills that had allowed her to help, for the determination that had driven her investigation, for the courage that had let her fall in love again. But most of all, gratitude for the choice to help, the choice to trust, the choice to hope, the choice to love. Because in the end, that's what life came down to. Not the circumstances you were born into or the challenges you faced, but the choices you made in response. The decision to stop or keep driving, to fight or give up, to close your heart or open it. Bryn had chosen to stop, to fight, to open her heart, and that choice, that one moment of courage on a rainy highway, had given her everything. Now, here's what I want you to understand. This isn't just Bryn and Rhodes' story. It's a reminder for all of us about the power we have in seemingly small moments. Every day, we face choices. We see someone struggling and decide whether to help or look away. We encounter injustice and choose to speak up or stay silent. We build walls to protect ourselves or take the risk of letting someone in. Bryn could have kept driving that night. No one would have blamed her. She had a daughter to protect, a life to preserve. But she stopped, and that choice, that 60 seconds of courage, didn't just save Rhodes's life. It transformed 3 lives. It created a family. It built a foundation that would help thousands of people. What I want you to take from this story is this: you have more power than you think. Your choice to help might seem small in the moment. Stopping for a stranger, reporting wrongdoing, offering a kind word to someone who's struggling. But you don't know the ripple effects. You don't know whose life you might save, whose future you might change, whose hope you might restore. Bryn was a single mother, working double shifts, struggling to get by. She wasn't wealthy or powerful or particularly advantaged, but she had courage. She had compassion. She had a willingness to act when action was needed, and that was enough to change everything. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you're faced with a choice between the easy path and the right path, between protecting yourself and helping someone else, between cynicism and hope, remember this story. Remember that single mother on a rainy highway who chose to stop. Remember that one act of courage can create ripples that extend far beyond what you can imagine. Remember that love, real lasting love, is built on choice. The choice to show up. The choice to be brave. The choice to believe that good things are possible. Rhodes almost died in that car crash, but because Bryn chose to stop, he lived. He thrived. He found love and family and purpose. And Bryn, who'd been surviving in loneliness, found partnership and joy and a life bigger than she'd dared to dream. All because of one choice, one moment of courage, one decision to help a stranger. What choice will you make today? Who will you help? What small act of courage might change someone's life, might change your own life in ways you can't yet imagine? Because here's the beautiful truth that Bryn and Rhodes' story teaches us. Happy endings aren't just for fairy tales. They're real. They're possible. But they require courage. They require action. They require choosing hope over fear, connection over isolation, love over self-protection. And sometimes they start with something as simple as choosing to stop. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that courage matters and kindness matters, and that one person really can make a difference, I'd be honored if you'd share it. Share it with someone who needs hope, someone who's questioning whether their actions matter, someone who's forgotten that beautiful things can grow from terrible moments. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story. Drop a comment, sharing a time when someone's kindness changed your life, or when your choice to help made a difference. Let's build a community of people who believe in the power of courage, in the possibility of second chances, in the truth that love is always, always worth the risk. And remember, you are braver than you think. Your choices matter more than you know. And somewhere out there, there might be someone waiting for you to stop, to help, to be the turning point in their story. Be that person. Make that choice. Change that life. And who knows, you might just change your own life in the process. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for believing, like Bryn and Rhodes, that courage and love can transform everything. Until next time, this is Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips, reminding you that every ending is really just a beginning. And sometimes the best beginnings start with a single choice to stop and help a stranger in the rain.